The rain fell in relentless sheets, hammering the cracked pavement outside the small, dimly lit coffee shop on the edge of town. Inside, Clara Bennett sat alone at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug, the steam long gone. Her reflection in the rain-streaked window showed a woman worn by time and loss, her auburn hair streaked with gray, her green eyes dulled by years of quiet struggle. At 42, Clara had known more heartbreak than most, a marriage that crumbled under the weight of betrayal, a daughter lost to a car accident at 16, and a life savings drained by medical bills that couldn't save her. Yet, every morning, she came to this coffee shop, not for the coffee, but for the fleeting warmth of human connection, a smile from a barista, a nod from a stranger. Today, though, her heart felt heavier than usual, as if the rain had seeped into her soul. She didn't notice the man in the worn trench coat who slipped into the shop, his face shadowed, his shoulders hunched against the storm. She didn't know that this moment, this seemingly ordinary morning, would change her life forever. If you believe in the power of kindness, in second chances, or in the magic of unexpected moments, please hit that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, share this story with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks for more stories that touch the heart. Your support keeps these stories alive. Clara's life hadn't always been this way. Once, she'd been a dreamer, a painter whose vibrant canvases captured the colors of hope and love. She and her husband, Daniel, had planned a life full of art and adventure, their daughter Lily the bright center of their world. But when Lily died, the colors faded. Daniel left, unable to bear the grief, and Clara's paintbrushes gathered dust in a closet she never opened. She took a job as a night shift cleaner at a hospital, scrubbing floors to pay off debts that seemed to multiply like shadows. The coffee shop became her sanctuary, a place where she could pretend, for a few hours, that she was just another person with a story yet to be written. She'd watch people come and go, students with laptops, couples whispering over pastries, loners like her who seemed to carry their own invisible burdens. She never spoke much, but she noticed everything, the way the barista, MIA, always slipped an extra sugar packet to the old man who came in at 7, or how the delivery guy lingered by the counter, stealing glances at MIA. Clara saw the small kindnesses that kept the world turning, and sometimes, when she could afford it, she'd pay for a stranger's coffee. It was her way of fighting the darkness, of proving to herself that she still had something to give. That morning, the man in the trench coat caught her eye, not because he stood out, but because he didn't. His clothes were plain, slightly frayed at the cuffs, and his shoes were scuffed, as if they'd walked 1,000 miles. He ordered a black coffee, his voice low and tired, and when he reached for his wallet, his hands fumbled, empty. The barista, MIA, hesitated, her smile faltering as she explained the shop's policy. Clara saw the man's shoulders sag, a quiet defeat that mirrored her own. Without thinking, she stood, her chair scraping against the floor, and walked to the counter. "I'll cover it," she said softly, sliding a crumpled $5 bill across the counter. The man turned, his face half hidden by the collar of his coat, and for a moment, their eyes met. His were a piercing blue, sharp yet haunted, like a sky after a storm. He murmured a thank you, almost inaudible, and took his coffee to a table by the window. Clara returned to her seat, her heart a little lighter, unaware that she'd just altered the course of her destiny. The man, whose name was Elias Worth, was no ordinary stranger. At 68, he was one of the world's richest men, a billionaire whose tech empire had reshaped industries. But wealth hadn't spared him pain. His wife had died young, his only son had drifted into a life of addiction, and his empire, built on ambition, felt hollow without someone to carry it forward. Elias had no heir, no one he trusted to inherit his legacy. For years, he'd searched for meaning in boardrooms and balance sheets, but found none. So, he began a quiet quest, one he kept secret even from his closest advisors. Disguised as an ordinary man, He wandered cities, towns, and forgotten corners, watching for acts of genuine humanity. Someone who didn't know his name or his worth but showed him kindness anyway. He'd seen charity born of pity, generosity laced with agenda, but rarely the quiet, selfless act that Clara had just performed. As he sipped his coffee, he studied her from across the room, the woman who'd paid for his drink without a second thought, who carried her own pain yet chose to lighten someone else's. He wondered who she was, what her story held, and whether she might be the one he'd been searching for. Clara's days blended into one another, a monochrome routine of work, sleep, and the coffee shop. But something shifted after that morning. The man in the trench coat returned the next day, and the day after that, always ordering the same black coffee, always sitting by the window. He never spoke to her, but she felt his presence, like a shadow that didn't threaten but lingered. She began to notice small things about him, the way his hands trembled slightly when he lifted his cup, the way his eyes seemed to trace the rain as if searching for answers in its patterns. She wondered about his life, what had brought him to this small town, this unremarkable coffee shop. Her own struggles pressed harder against her, bills piling up, a landlord threatening eviction, the hospital cutting her hours. Yet, each time she saw the man, she felt a spark of curiosity, a reminder that she wasn't the only one carrying a story. She started leaving $1 or $2 for his coffee when she could, slipping the money to MIA with a shy smile. It was reckless, given her own finances, but it felt like defiance against a world that had taken so much. Elias watched Clara with growing fascination. He'd hired a discreet investigator to learn about her, not out of suspicion, but out of a need to understand. He learned of her losses, her quiet resilience, the way she'd kept going despite a life that seemed determined to break her. He saw her paintings in a local gallery's online archive, vibrant works from a time when she still believed in beauty. He read about Lily, saw photos of a girl with Clara's green eyes, and felt a pang of shared grief. Elias had no children left to lose, but he knew the ache of absence. Each day, he returned to the coffee shop, not just to observe but to feel the weight of her kindness. She didn't know he was testing her, that each coffee she paid for was a thread in a tapestry he was weaving, a test of character, a search for someone worthy of his legacy. He began to leave small signs of his presence, a folded newspaper with a headline circled, a book left on a table with a note tucked inside. He wanted to see if she'd notice, if she'd reach out, if her kindness extended beyond instinct to curiosity. Clara's life grew darker before it brightened. Her landlord served an eviction notice, and the hospital let her go, citing budget cuts. She sat in the coffee shop one evening, staring at the eviction letter, her hands shaking. The rain outside mirrored her turmoil, each drop a reminder of how close she was to losing everything. She didn't notice Elias watching from his usual table, his coffee untouched. She didn't see him slip a small envelope under her bag when she stepped away to the restroom. When she returned, she found it, a plain white envelope with her name scrawled in neat handwriting. Inside was a key and a note, for a new beginning. Meet me at 127 Maple Street, tomorrow at noon. No signature, no explanation. Her first instinct was fear. Strangers didn't leave keys and cryptic notes, but something in the handwriting, steady yet vulnerable, made her pause. She looked around, but the man in the trench coat was gone. That night, she barely slept, the key heavy in her palm, her mind torn between caution and a flicker of hope. The next day, Clara stood outside 127 Maple Street, a small, ivy-covered cottage she'd passed 1,000 times without noticing. The key fit the lock perfectly, and when she stepped inside, she found a space that felt like a dream she'd forgotten. Canvases lined the walls, blank but waiting, and a skylight poured soft light onto a wooden easel. A note on the table read, "This is yours, if you choose it." Paint again, live again. Her heart pounded as she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw the man from the coffee shop, his trench coat gone, his face no longer shadowed. He introduced himself as Elias Worth, and in a voice thick with emotion, he told her everything: his wealth, his search, his belief that she, Clara, was the heir he'd been seeking. Not for his money alone, but for his vision, a foundation to fund artists, dreamers, and those who'd lost their way. He'd seen her heart in every coffee she paid for, every quiet moment she chose kindness over despair. Clara stood frozen, the weight of his words sinking in. She wanted to refuse, to say she was no one special, just a woman trying to survive. But Elias's eyes held her, steady and certain, and for the first time in years, she felt seen. He didn't want her to run his empire. He wanted her to lead with her heart, to use his resources to heal others as she'd healed him with a simple act. Over the next weeks, Clara hesitated, wrestling with doubt. Could she trust this? Could she trust herself? She visited the cottage daily, touching the canvases, feeling the pull of a life she'd buried. Slowly, she began to paint again, bold strokes of color that told stories of loss, hope, and second chances. Elias mentored her, sharing his vision, his regrets, his belief that she could carry it forward. Their bond grew, not as benefactor and heir, but as two souls who'd found each other in the rain. Months later, Clara stood in the cottage, now a studio buzzing with artists she'd invited to create. The foundation was thriving, funded by Elias's wealth but guided by Clara's heart. She'd paid off her debts, found a new home, but more importantly, she'd found purpose. Elias, weaker now, his health fading, visited one last time. He smiled at her paintings, at the light in her eyes, and said, "You were my heir, Clara, but you've become so much more." He passed away that winter, leaving her not just his fortune but his faith in humanity. Clara stood at his grave, rain falling softly, and promised to keep his vision alive. She returned to the coffee shop, paid for a stranger's coffee, and smiled, knowing that every small act could change a life. This story, dear viewers, is a reminder that kindness, no matter how small, can ripple through the world in ways we never imagine. If Clara and Elias's journey touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks for more stories that remind us to keep giving, keep loving, keep believing. And before you go, leave a comment below. Tell us about a moment when a small act of kindness changed your life. Your story might inspire someone else, just as Clara's did.